Exploring creator selection. Let's talk about how to pick and choose. Okay, the needles in the haystacks, the diamonds in the rough. When reviewing a new potential creator partner, can you summarize your review process? What are you kind of looking for? What kind of things do you check? Is there hard metrics, soft metrics? What are the most important things, big red flags? How do you choose your soulmate influencer?
You've got to be very strategic, and like ultimately this is the game. Like you've got to choose the best creators. You've got to choose the people who are reaching your audience, who have the best content, all of the kind of main topics to help your brand grow and to ultimately achieve any goals that you have within influencer marketing. So I guess like if you were wanting to break it out by step by step by step, obviously step one, they need to be reaching your audience, like your target consumer, and it could be your core consumer, it could be a new consumer group, it could be somebody who you where you may be under indexed that you're trying to get more orders or more eyes on this particular customer group. So as soon as you identify that audience, the demographic of the audience per creator, and it matches your own, like that's almost like step one, tick. Then you kind of move on to, I guess, hard and soft metrics. So your hard metrics are like shameless plug, everything that Modash pull for you. Without them, I guess you're kind of you're batting in the dark a bit there. Everything from audience reachability, so how reachable the audience is of your content, to previous brand collaborations. God, there's so many feet. Like, help me out here because I'm drawing a blank. But we kind of like look at them all. All of the hard metrics that you can see,
Yeah.
engagement rate, all of that. And then I've always had kind of certain benchmarks that they have to reach based on previous performances. So I guess before I could carry on, but I think the main thing around creator selection is you've got to test initially with your campaigns, and you've got to find the creators that work and kind of work with similar creators to that, but focus on the data around that. So I think it's going to be test and learn to start, and you're going to have creators that do not so good for you, like not great for your brand, or the content doesn't hit. But the ones that do, you've got to take those learnings and pass them on to try and find new talent in that regard.
Yeah, agree. I think like from my side to add is like depending on where you work, definitely check if there are any brand guidelines. If there's anything you need to kind of pay attention to. But I guess from my side, it's always great to be inclusive and kind of try to work with everyone, because at the same time you want your products be in everyone's hands. So you've got to be a little bit open-minded when it comes to content creators. Then I think what Ben said, like use influencer marketing tools to kind of very much check everything that this is clear. I think what you could also ask is, or like I actually think it's mandatory. Again, it depends on like what the goal is. If it's like performance based, definitely ask the influencer and the agent for some stats, and maybe even ask for screen grabs, because in my kind of like experience, some talent agents or even influencers faked their stats, and it actually turned out that whatever they sent to us beforehand wasn't actually the true data that they actually had. So that might be a good way to really see what it actually looks like in their profile. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's it. Like be open-minded. And again, what Ben said, I think you've got to be prepared to fail, especially with performance campaigns. I would say probably 3 out of 5 campaigns will work. The rest will not work. And I think you just, again, you got to be open-minded and just like take that off. Like, yes, 2 influencers didn't work, 3 worked. It could be because of XYZ reasons. Content wasn't great, call to action wasn't clear, or just the influencer didn't resonate really well for the company or the product. It's okay. It's like all a learning. You just got to move forward and take those learnings and to very much perfect what kind of influencer works for you and what doesn't.
And those efficiencies that you touch on kind of grow over time. So
Yeah.
like month one, you might work with 50 people, 10 people perform well, 40 don't. But then you shift those 10 people who work well to your next month, and then you only have to find 4. You've got 40 you're choosing from. So by month 10, 11, 12, once you've been doing it for a year, you could be working with 50, 60 creators who are then like proven performers, long-term ambassadors, and you've refined your selection and you've tested and learned, and you stick with the guys who are good. So yeah, like don't be disheartened when that first month you have a terrible cost of sale, but it gets better over time, definitely.
Very well. I have very well said. I have the impression that a lot of folks, it kind of takes time to build the selection muscle. That people are really, they suffer from analysis paralysis in the beginning, and they can't quite make a decision because this person doesn't have enough lamps in their picture, and this person only has a 2.1% engagement rate when they need a 2.2% engagement rate, and they really get stuck like looking for something that just doesn't exist, maybe because they're just not familiar with the platform, or they don't think about the channel in the way that kind of connects the brand to the creator, to the platform, to the audience, and have a holistic vision of what that creator really is and what's really out there. Any advice for those folks who are suffering from analysis paralysis in the beginning?
Yeah, I think you can spend hours looking at the data forever. And I know Fee and I will be able to talk of a million occasions where your top performer could literally be nowhere near your guidebook or playbook and have a 0.4% engagement rate and pretty average reach. And then if on a performance or like CPA campaign could be your number one top performer. So don't always get hung up over over those like 0.1% differences, because they might not make a difference. And I think it all comes back to kind of working at scale. Like when you work with 50 influencers a month or 100 influencers a month for one person, you're not going to find 100 people who tick every single box. But as a collective, you're going to tick the majority of them. So I'd say, don't necessarily sweat the small figures.
And I would actually say, I think when you select influencers, you probably need to put a little bit of a different hat on. So I guess my social feed looks completely different to what when I outreach or when I used to outreach. Because I think actually sometimes the content creators that, in my opinion, wouldn't have like worked because of maybe the aesthetics. I guess it's like very biased because like personally for me, that's not someone I would follow, but that doesn't mean that this influencer isn't working for the product or the brand. So I actually think those niche influencers, content creators with like really authentic, maybe not that polished aesthetic kind of feed posts, they're the ones that actually sometimes work really well. So you just gotta remind yourself that you have to put a different head on. This is like now my outreach head, not your personal social media feed head. And also like very much look at niches like momfluencers. It's like a big term. They work really well. Personally for me, because I'm not in that position yet, it's nothing that would really interest me. But again, like you just gotta be a little bit flexible in terms of what you're like looking for. Or like for example at finfluencers, like female in tech productivity, that's like a big topic at the moment. Again, if this is like something that you're not interested in, you wouldn't naturally go for those influencers. But at the same time, you gotta think smart and think about these ones because they're actually a huge niche that could work well for you.
I mean,
Totally.
I spent 2 years working with female luxury fashion influencers, and it's not necessarily my kind of forte, but I guess I always looked at the data and I used the data as kind of my best friend to make more informed decisions. And I guess having access to it really helped you, like Fee said, reach new audiences and think kind of outside of what you consume content wise. If you can focus on the data to help you make those decisions, it's a godsend.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes people forget about the audience. They get so hung up on the influencer that they forget who they're actually trying to reach. And so instead of empathizing with their own customer and maybe the audience underneath all this content that they're sifting through, like you said, you're not necessarily scrolling luxury fashion or momfluencers after your 9 to 5. It's just not how you spend your time. But your customer might be. That might be the thing that really gets them excited. I mean, there's a lot of people out there watching Magnus Carlsen play his 300th game of chess right now, and I just don't have the intellect to process this content, but people will watch a game of chess for hours and find it riveting. And so if you're selling chessboards, you have to empathize with that customer and relay the message to that group of people. Ben, you mentioned something that I have literally never heard before. It's a novel idea for me, and it's this idea of thinking of your creators more as cohorts than individuals. So where you have a maybe a campaign strategy or some sort of thing you're trying to do, and you make sure that the group of creators checks a lot of those boxes. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit? Because I've never heard it expressed that way before.
Yeah, of course. I guess when operating at scale, you can almost start to put your different clusters of influencers into tribes almost that target one main consumer group that you're going to go after. So using the mumfluencers example, if you're trying to reach 40 to 45 to 50-year-old kind of older, maybe like older mums, you can't work with one person to attract that customer group. You have to work with 10, 15, 20 of them. And there's always going to be kind of leakage there. Like they might not skew as much in terms of reachability to that audience, but as a collective, they're going to hit really hard that customer group. And I think around having a lot of people kind of targeting that one group as well also adds to the authenticity of the kind of marketing and the legitimacy of your brand as well. So if they're seeing like kind of multiple voices within that group talking about your product, talking about your brand, it makes it more authentic, makes it more legitimate as well. So I guess treating, you know, a group of influencers as kind of a cluster and then targeting a segment of your audience as a cluster rather than as just one influencer trying to reach that whole kind of group. I think that's kind of, the point I was trying to make.
I guess your budget flexibility gets way stronger there as well, because now you're distributing your risk, for lack of better phrasing. You're distributing the budget and the risk across this big cohort of creators. You're diversifying the channel, basically. It's really a really cool idea. Is there any red flags, any like really hard and true, carved in stone criteria that you'll just never work with somebody if this is the case? Maybe engagement rate 0.4% apparently isn't the floor. Where is the floor, and what other metrics are indicating it?
I guess it's the beauty, or like I guess the risk with influencer marketing. A red flag you might be able to only see after you've actually activated the influencer or the content creator. As I said, like sometimes, and that is really just like a small percentage, the data that you might receive is actually not true to what it actually is. So sometimes you just got to learn the hard way and then maybe just decide for yourself, okay, maybe I won't go back to that person again. But I guess again, depends on the company. Like some companies have guidelines that they don't want to engage with anyone lower than 3% engagement rate, and they're actually missing out a huge chunk of influencers there. Or I guess overall, I would just say have a look at the overall followers, then ask for some, I don't know, views, reach, maybe even ask for link clicks, and then kind of very much see on like what the average is between that and your followers, if that like looks healthy, and just like use your common sense, I guess, a little bit.
I think link clicks is a really interesting one we haven't really touched on, but they could share, for example, I've had influencers share like one reel that's gone viral. It's just been picked up by the Instagram kind of algorithm, and it's reached like their accounts reached 10 million people in 4 weeks. I'm like, okay, amazing. But if you've got 40k followers and every time you post a story you get 10 link clicks, like I'm not going to pay for that like millions of reach that you supposedly get every month. Like if 10 people are clicking through your content, it's not going to be like a valuable kind of campaign. So I think like that's kind of a red flag. Like if they're like really low link clicks, I think is something to consider. I think also to add to what Fee said as well, previous brand collaborations, so who they've worked with in the past. You know, if you're luxury fashion and they've worked with Shein multiple times, then it's just not going to come across as authentic. You have to respect the influencer, the creator, and their audience. If you're trying to push a collaboration to a creator whose previous content has been so different to your product, it's just going to come across as inauthentic, and the collaboration is not going to be a success. So I think red flags, maybe not a red flag, but something to consider is like past brand collaborations and making sure that it's aligned with your values as a brand as well.
Yeah. And I guess like I think with the previous brand collaboration, I think you can be bold as well as a marketer to ask the agent or the influencer if they could share any stats of like a similar product or campaign. I guess there's like no harm to ask. I think most of the time they will share it, even if maybe some information are blurred out. But I think definitely ask for it. As I said, really valuable information.
Any unique green flags? Anything that's been a surprise to you, maybe that, oh, actually, this little thing over here is a huge indicator of success? We had one person on our podcast. Check out the podcast if you're watching the video. Then go check out the podcast. From Torlane, who had been correlating all kinds of data for a very long time, and they built a scorecard that included some qualitative metrics. And the one thing that they found that really drove performance was when they did a call with the creator, how well the person in the call, the interviewer, you could say, scored their enthusiasm about the partnership correlated really highly with success. And I thought that was like incredible finding, actually. Have you stumbled across any interesting green flags in your days?
That's really interesting. I guess like we've never hit. I don't know if maybe you have, but like getting on calls with creators prior to campaigns. I think when you're operating at such scale, it's quite tricky to go down that route. But I guess for me, and it's actually something that you can't necessarily pull data on. It's their ability for the influencer to engage with their community. And the top performers that I've always worked with have an amazing relationship with their audience. And their audience don't see them as like an influencer, as a creator. They see them almost as a friend and as like an ally. Mm-hmm. So I guess things that you can look at is like Q&As that they might do, like styling sessions in fashion, like how the influencer engages with their kind of audience, but almost like gives them advice, and so it comes across that they're actually trying to help their audience rather than like sell to them. So I guess it's kind of like a tone thing, content thing as well, but ability to engage with your community like on a human level outside of just trying to sell them stuff or take nice photos, I think is my like number one green flag.
Yeah. And I guess that ties in as well is you have to check where the influencer is from. So let's say if I'm sitting in the UK, but actually I'm running a campaign with someone in the US, you just maybe need to also like adapt in terms of like what they need from a cultural point of view, because everyone works differently. Also like me being from Germany, I guess like what Ben just said, you need to just like adapt on like how you approach different. So what maybe that the brand said, or like the brand did that you just mentioned, with jumping on a call with an influencer might work in one market, but maybe might not be really well received on the other market. So again, you need to be having a bit of a localized approach, maybe checking what is like actually your audience, who are you working with, what is like kind of the cultural, what's the cultural approach there, and then kind of find out your green flags, I would say.
There's been two themes so far. One interesting bit is the looking over time at performance and deciding what those green flags are, looking for trends and that kind of thing. I think you both have mentioned that throughout the discussion so far. And the other thing that I'm learning in this call is that while influencer marketing has come a long way, we all still disagree just a little bit about what's perfect. And I think that's so much fun. It's there's so much room for us to kind of learn how this thing works still. To kind of come back to that analysis paralysis issue, how much time should people put on analyzing one creator? How much effort how complicated should we be doing formulaic, algebraic, geometric equations to figure this out? Should we kind of look at the content and go, yep, looks good, done? What's the balance here?
I would probably say you should probably spend more time analyzing than just checking the content. It's hard to say because it depends. If you want to really scale in influencer marketing, yes, you cannot spend hours and hours on analyzing every single influencer for like an hour. But I think the more you practice and the more you're in the game, I think you just become a bit of a expert, and then I think you relatively see some patterns and you know who will work and who won't work. But I would say 60%, if not more, go to the analytics to really make sure that this person works for you or not. Not sure. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I agree. I think like you've got to try and take as much of the guesswork out of it as possible. Otherwise, you're just going off instinct. And I think you can go off instinct and get lucky quite a few times. But if you actually want to have a very advanced program, you need to rely on something outside of just your knowledge or your feeling around a creator. And I think looking at the data is the way to do that. I think it does get quicker with time. Like, you know what works. Like, once you've run hundreds and hundreds of campaigns, you can just immediately look at the Modash dashboard and see, like, they're not going to work because their engagement is really low, or their reach to whatever is lower than what we would look for. So it gets quicker over time, but yeah, like exactly like Fee said, I would 100% pay as much attention to it as you can.
Since we're speaking to folks who are a little bit earlier in their influencer partnerships careers, maybe than you two are, has your thinking evolved over time? Did you start out in a different position, and as far as choosing creators goes, and maybe how has that change happened? Were you really stubborn about 0.4% engagement rates back in the day, or have you always thought this way?
I think that's a tough question. I think depending on how many campaigns you activate, you probably get to a point. I'm not saying there's only a limited numbers of content creators, but you do probably get to a point where you have exhausted quite a lot of influencers and content creators, and then I guess it's your turn to really think outside the box, and then that's when you actually start thinking, maybe let's have a look at influencers that have a lower engagement rate. Let's see if they actually still work. I think you just get to a point where you have to try out different things, because otherwise you won't get anywhere. That's from my experience, I would say. Yeah. It just comes with with experience, and depending on how many campaigns you activate it.
I totally agree. I think when I started, I was kind of expecting everybody to perform well, or at least perform a little bit. This is on performance campaigns, I guess. But I guess the way that my thinking's evolved is that you're constantly looking for that unicorn creator who has just amazing, like, convincing skills and is amazing at selling your product, but does it in a really authentic way. And you find like diamonds in the rough every now and again, but you have to do it at scale, and you have to fail in order to find them. So I think my thought process has evolved in a way that by accepting that not everything's going to be a success, but knowing that the more time you invest and the more effort you put into kind of creator selection and working with people on scale, you're going to find these unicorn creators who are just insane at what they do, and then you can work with them, make them brand ambassadors, work with them every single month of the year. So I guess that's how my thinking's evolved.